Now we will discuss the scope of psycholinguistics. The scope of psycholinguistics is very broad. This particular field, psycholinguistics, is a part of the emerging field of study which is called cognitive sciences. Now, cognitive science is an interdisciplinary field, interdisciplinary area, which takes into account number of other disciplines such as philosophy, psychology, linguistics, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, as well as intelligence. Now, when we look at cognitive science, primarily it deals with the study of human mind and language. Now, when I say that it is a broader term, that means that the other areas in terms of philosophy, intelligence, neuroscience, psychology, they also play a very important role in the understanding or studying the different areas of language and language production. Psycholinguistics is interested in looking at different ways of storing lexical items as well as the syntactic rules in mind. What particular class of lexical items are stored easily? What particular class of syntactic rules are stored in mind, and how not only the storing in mind, but how the processes enable individuals to use those lexical items and syntactic rules in a given situation. It also looks at the processes of memory involved in perception and interpretation of a text. Perception is something which is very subjective and individual tends to develop and interpret text based on one's own personal experiences, one's own personal reflection of their own surroundings. And language plays an important role in terms of developing or shaping those perceptions as well as facilitating the interpretation of the text. Psycholinguistics covers three main points. One is comprehension, second is speech production, third is language acquisition, and these 3 points form the basis for a broader scope of the psycholinguistics. Looking at the very first component, which is the comprehension, that takes into account how people understand spoken and written language. There are 3 parameters that have been suggested. 1, A is imitation, B, conditioning, C, social cognition. So what is imitation? Imitation in language acquisition occurs when children imitate language patterns and vocabulary of those significant to them. Now, imitation is a very interesting phenomenon, and you can see and observe this phenomena among children. They imitate language patterns and vocabulary of those whom they find closer to them and those who have some kind of influence on them. Especially their first exposure is towards to their parents. So they learn whatever the word they speak, they try to imitate those words. They try to imitate the way those words are spoken to them. So that is how they imitate and get into the process of understanding. Second is conditioning, and that refers or takes us to B.F. Skinner's idea of conditioning or habituation to the child's speech. That is how reinforcement the child gets by repeating one word over and over again, and once that word is reinforced in a positive manner, the child develops the habit of speaking or developing the vocabulary through this process of reinforcement. C is social cognition. That is, children gain an understanding of words, semantics, because he understood the purpose of one's cognition to produce a phoneme through a mechanism of joint attention. Second point is speech production. That is how people produce language. Spoken words are selected to be produced, have their phonetics formulated, and then finally are articulated by the motor system in the vocal apparatus. So the production, how the speech is produced, consists of the selection and then the formulation of phonetics and finally the articulation by the motor system. Third is language acquisition. How people learn language. Language acquisition is the process by which humans acquire the capacity to perceive and comprehend language as well as to produce and use words to communicate. So not only the process of acquisition, but then at the end, after acquisition, how the words are produced for the communication purposes. Looking at the significance of psycholinguistics, it has its significance in the language teaching and learning, and as well as it has a detailed study in terms of the psychology of language. So the significance of psycholinguistics is not only understanding these 3 points, but also in the area of language teaching and learning. To conclude, scope of psycholinguistics involves how language is acquired, produced by the users, how brain works on language, and as well as comprehension, speech production, and acquisition processes.